Retirement planning isn't just about making sure your money lasts. It's about making sure that you use it in a way that aligns with your values and your goals. So do you want to maximize your lifestyle, leave a financial legacy, or strike a balance between the two? Today we're going to be walking through a powerful framework called the 3-Fund Retirement Strategy. It's designed to secure your income, grow your wealth, and ensure that you leave behind the legacy that you want. It'll be about how to balance spending and a legacy in retirement. To help you visualize how this works, I'll guide you through an example that reflects a common retirement scenario, but as we go through this, think about how this applies to you. And make sure you have a pen and paper because you'll be answering some key questions along the way. Don't forget to check out my retirement readiness score calculator to see where you stand. So, quick question before we dive in. What's your priority? Is it spending more in retirement or leaving a legacy? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So, let's get started. Step 1, start with the end in mind. So, the first question you need to answer is, what's your ultimate goal? Do you want to prioritize spending your assets down, or do you want to leave a legacy? So a way to think about this is, do you want to die with zero, or do you want to leave a legacy? And a legacy doesn't mean that you have to leave all of your money. It just means you could leave some of it. So if we have no legacy, we're focusing on maximizing spending during your retirement, versus a modest legacy balances spending with some wealth transfer. And then we also have a significant legacy. This is prioritizing estate planning and multi-generational wealth. So let's consider James. He's a 55-year-old retiree with $2.2 million in investments. He wants to enjoy his retirement and also ensure that his children receive a financial legacy. He wants them to receive $500,000 each because he has 2 children, and that's pretty reasonable. So as you listen to this, think about your own situation. So right now, write down whether you want to die with zero or leave a legacy. And then if you want to leave a legacy, figure out how much you currently have and how much you'd be willing to put aside to give to your children. So that's the first step of the scenario. So your turn. Write down whether you want to spend your assets down completely or leave some money behind or build a lasting legacy with generational wealth. Step 2, define your expenses and your income. Next, you're going to have to define your expected expenses. You'll want to categorize them into 2 groups. So first, we have essential expenses. This is your housing, food, healthcare, insurance, transportation expenses. Then we have discretionary expenses. This is travel, hobbies, family gifts, donations, all of those things that we don't necessarily need, but we want to have. So for example, James needs about $120,000 per year. That's $80,000 for essentials and $40,000 for discretionary spending. So now that we've figured out how much he needs, we need to figure out how much guaranteed income he has. So he's expecting some Social Security and a pension, so he doesn't have that much that he has to come up with for his investments. So here's a question for you. How much will you receive in your Social Security and how much is your pension? So your turn. Write down your annual estimated expenses and your annual expected income in retirement. Once you have that number, we can move on to step 3. So how much do you expect to spend each year in retirement? Step 3, assess your risk tolerance and risk capacity. So there's 2 differences. Let's talk about risk. Your comfort with market fluctuations and your ability to take on risk will influence how you invest. So 1, we have risk tolerance. That's how much volatility you're emotionally comfortable with. Then we have risk capacity, and it's how much risk you can afford to take based on your financial situation. So, for example, since James' essential expenses will basically be covered with Social Security and his pension, he decides that he can take a moderate level of risk with his investments. Imagine the stock market drops 20% overnight. What's your immediate reaction? Is it A, no concern, I know the markets are going to recover, you have a high risk tolerance. B, you're slightly worried, and I would like to stay the course. That's a moderate risk tolerance where you're still a little bit concerned. C, major concern. You would consider selling all of your investments or just some of them. That's low risk tolerance. Panic, I would sell everything immediately to avoid further loss. Well, that's a very low risk tolerance. So what I want you to do is write down your answer A, B, C, or D, whether you would do nothing, you would consider selling, you would sell a little bit, or you would sell it all. What would you do? And so that's going to be reflecting on how comfortable you are with your investment risk. Step 4, now we get to the fun part where we're actually structuring the 3-fund retirement strategy. So now that you've thought about your expenses and your risk, it's time to actually structure your portfolio into the 3-fund strategy. So number 1, we have the Freedom Fund. This is your short-term needs. So goal is to preserve capital for 2 to 3 years of near-term withdrawals. So for example, for James, he's going to be placing $360,000, that's 3 years worth, in cash, money markets, or short-term bonds to cover 3 years of his expenses, just in case the market takes a dive and he still wants to have that protection. So this is going to give you freedom and peace of mind. That's why it's called the Freedom Fund. The next one is our Bridge Fund, and this is where we're going to have our medium or midterm needs. So the goals for this one is to provide moderate growth and flexibility between 4 and 10 years. So we want to match our bond duration, our bond time frame, with our allocation in this Bridge Fund. So for example, James is going to have $600,000 in a balanced mix of stocks and bonds. And what I mean by that is we're going to be 50% equities and 50% bonds. And I'll talk about what those specific allocations are when we get to the asset location side. Lastly, we have our legacy fund. This is your long-term growth. The goal for this is to maximize long-term growth for wealth transfer, because the only place that you're actually going to build wealth is in equities. And that's why we want the majority of our funds to be there, so that if we're planning on leaving a legacy, it's going to be able to grow and leave a sizable one for our heirs. So the $1.2 million, we're going to have that invested primarily in equities. So your turn. What I want you to do is write down how much you would allocate in each one of these funds. Are you going to be putting 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years worth of expenses in your Freedom Fund, and then figure out how many years you want in your Bridge Fund? Are you really comfortable with taking risk? Then you may not need as much in your Bridge Fund. But if you're not that comfortable with the risk, maybe you need up to 10 years worth of protection inside of your Bridge Fund, just in case we have a long extended downturn in the market. And lastly, depending on how big of a legacy you want to leave, that's where the size of this fund is going to come into play. So think about what you would put in each one of those funds, and then we can move on to the next step. Step 5, asset location and tax-efficient withdrawal strategy. So beyond investment allocation, where you hold your assets matters for taxes. So let's break it down. Asset location strategy is going to be, we have taxable accounts, we have tax-deferred accounts, and tax-free accounts. So for taxable accounts, this is best for tax-efficient ETFs and stocks. Then we have tax-deferred accounts. This is like your IRA or 401k. And this is best for bonds and income-producing assets, because every time we receive that income, if it's in a taxable account, you're going to be paying taxes on it. In a tax-deferred account, you're not paying taxes on it at all until you pull it out. So that's why it's best for income-producing assets. Now we have tax-free accounts. This is your Roth IRA or Roth 401k. And this is best for high-growth investments. You want it to be as aggressive as possible in this because you want the assets to grow as much as possible. So for example, James has about $500,000 in taxable accounts, $500,000 in a Roth IRA, and about $1.2 million in a traditional IRA. So for asset location, the Roth or tax-free account is going to be 100% equities. It's going to be as aggressive as possible. Then we're going to have taxable accounts also be 100% equities. And lastly, for the traditional IRA, we're going to have 50% equities, 30% short-term bonds, and 20% intermediate bonds. So all in all, the total asset allocation for his entire portfolio is going to come out to be about 70-30. And now this is on the higher end of a moderate stance, but it's still within that range of a 60-40 to 70-30. So since he wants to have a little bit more of a legacy, we need to be towards that higher risk level on the moderate strategy. So here's how he's going to actually structure his withdrawals. So for a tax-efficient withdrawal strategy, we want to start off with the taxable accounts first. And so you might be wondering, why are we doing the short-term bonds? The short-term bonds are actually just there to give us peace of mind and freedom to know that if we actually need that money, it's there. Besides that, we actually want to take it from the most tax advantageous place. So what we're going to be doing is, since we have about $80,000 that we'll be getting from our guaranteed income, we only need about $40,000 more. So that $40,000 is going to come from dividends and capital gains. That's the first part. And so if we need more money, we're going to move to the traditional IRA next. Once we get up to the RMD age after 75 for him, we're going to be taking RMDs, and that will boost his income at that point in time. So we might have some tax strategy, but that's not the point of this video. That would be an entirely another video, entirely another circumstance. Well, right now, we're just figuring out how much income we actually need and how to structure an income strategy for spending and legacy. The Roth IRA is going to be the last account, and this is going to be left alone as long as possible because this is going to have tax-free growth. And if we think long-term about leaving a legacy, if we want to leave a legacy to our heirs, what's better? Is it to leave them with a big tax bill or not have any taxes at all? I think it's not have any taxes at all. And so this can be accomplished in two ways. We have tax-free accounts and taxable accounts. With taxable accounts, we actually get a step up in basis. That means that when you pass away, your heirs are going to receive a step up in basis and they're not going to have to pay any taxes at that point in time. Now, if the assets grow, then we might have to pay some taxes on the long-term capital gains. But the other side of it is, If we do a Roth IRA and we pass that on, even if the assets grow over the time period, which we have about 10 years to get out of it, we don't have to pay any taxes at all on that. So that's why it's so important to not touch that one unless we absolutely have to. And I want to say there are nuances to this. So let's think about this for just a second. Write down the accounts that you have and how much are in it. And then from there, what you can figure out is where you want to have your asset location. How much do you have in your rollover IRA or traditional IRA? How much do you have in a Roth? Do you even have a Roth? If you have all of your assets inside a traditional IRA, we might have a lot of opportunity to do some tax planning because you're going to have a lot of taxes throughout your lifetime. Versus if a lot of your assets are in a taxable brokerage account, we don't have that much flexibility to get rid of income producing assets, and we might have to hold it all inside of taxable accounts. So this is your question. Figure out how much you have in your taxable, your tax-free, and your tax-deferred accounts. Write that down, and then we'll move on to the next step. Step 6, implementing and adjusting your plan. So your retirement plan isn't static. It needs adjustments to stay on track. So here's what you need to review annually. Your spending versus your projections. Are you withdrawing at a sustainable rate? Did you happen to take out more this year or did you take out less? That's going to influence your entire decision making. So the next part is rebalancing your investments. So does your portfolio still match your risk tolerance? Did the market have a great year and now your equities are actually at 75%? Well, you might need to sell a little bit and move it over to bonds. Or did we have an absolutely terrible year and now your equities are only 50% and your bonds are 50%? We might need to sell some bonds and move it over to equities. That's the power of rebalancing, and we want to make sure we do that at least annually. And so the next step is, are there any tax adjustments? Are there opportunities for Roth conversions? Are there opportunities to refine your asset location? These are questions that you want to ask yourself each year to really think about how your financial plan is reacting on an annual basis. So lastly, within the implementation and adjustments, we're going to be looking at your estate plan. So are your beneficiaries and estate plan still aligned with your goals? Did anything change during the year? So that's just something that you really want to think about. So your turn. What you need to do is each year think about your goals, think about your legacy, and think about rebalancing in what your investments. Is everything still up to date and still where you want it to be? If it's not, it's time to make some changes. So that's just one thought process you want to go through. And there are a lot more questions that you need to think about. But right now, this is what we're going to be focusing on is, have you checked your investments? Have you checked your estate plan? And is there any tax planning opportunities that we could potentially have? So let's quickly recap what we just covered so that we can walk away with a clear action plan. So 1, start with the end in mind. Decide whether you want to prioritize spending, leave a legacy, or balance both. Number 2, define your expenses and income. Write down your essential and discretionary spending and what your guaranteed income is. Number 3, assess your risk. Evaluate your risk tolerance. Figure out how much you are willing to risk and how much you actually need to risk. Next, we move on to actually structuring the 3-fund strategy. So allocate assets into short-term, so this is your freedom fund, medium-term, your bridge fund, and long-term, your legacy fund buckets. Next, optimize your asset location and your withdrawals. Plan where you're going to be holding your investments and which accounts to withdraw from first. And lastly, review and adjust regularly. Set a reminder to check your plan every year and make necessary change. Now we went through all of this, and for James, he now has a structured retirement plan that allows him to enjoy his life and ensure his children receive a lasting financial legacy. And you can do the same by following this framework. So your final step is to take 5 minutes right now to answer the questions we just went through. And don't forget, at the very beginning, I mentioned my retirement readiness score calculator. You can use that to get an idea of where you're at. This is just a simple calculator just to see how prepared you are. So if you found this helpful, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more videos.